And well. Welcome back to New York Sports WickerMedia. I'm watching K99. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to watch these videos. Well, the Jets have made their general manager hire official. It is indeed Darren Mougey, who has spent nearly his entire football career with the Denver Broncos. So congratulations to Mougey. He basically was one of 15 candidates interviewed. Only 3 got second interviews, and ultimately the Johnson brothers made their decision to go with Darren Mougey. Now, let's talk a little bit about Mougey, his history, his story, and how he got this particular job. So he has a very strong relationship with Sean Payton, who, of course, is also a longtime mentor of Aaron Glenn. So he's really only worked with Denver. He played college football at San Diego State. As a player, had quick stops with both Atlanta and Arizona. And it was in 2012 when he joined Denver as a scouting intern, and he's been with them pretty much right up until today. So he was hired as a scouting intern under John Elway, who had just taken over as general manager. So then he works his way up to personnel and scouting assistant 1 year later. 2014 becomes a pro personnel scout, an area scout from 2015 to 2019. Then in 2020, he becomes the Broncos assistant director of college scouting. So then 2020, Elway's out. George Patton, General Patton, takes over, and he retained Mougey, which he did not do with much of that Denver staff. As a matter of fact, he promoted Mougey to director of player personnel and then to assistant general manager. And he served in that job for basically 3 years. So just think about this one progression. He went from an area scout to an assistant general manager in 3 years, and he's still under 40 years old. He's 39, the third youngest general manager in the NFL. Yes, he's younger than Aaron Rodgers. I'm sure the AR haters will laugh hysterically over that. So Mougey, he's got a ton of scouting experience. That's what he really is. He has that scouting background, and that is sort of where the Jets tend to go to for general managers, whether it's Mike McCagnon, whether it's Joe Douglas, whether it's that absolute stiff John Idzik. But he also has some management in pro and college scouting. It's not like he was a head scout and then got promoted directly. He has been really involved in the front office with George Patton, making decisions on free agency, on the draft, on trades as well. And we think about some of these moves that the Broncos have made. They quietly became a good team this year. You know, Nick Benito in the second round, Marvin Mims in the second round, Riley Moss in the third round, Jonah Ellis in the third round. It's actually pretty amazing. Since Mougey got promoted to the role that he's in now 3 years ago, the Broncos have had only one number 1 pick, and that was Bo Nix, who looks like he's going to be a good quarterback. I hesitate to say he's going to set the world on fire. So that is basically it. So the Broncos kind of quietly built up this roster with a lot of mid and low level draft picks and some calculated moves in free agency. The trade of John Franklin Myers, but the less said about that, the better. But it's interesting to go back to Patton and why he kept Mougey after he let so many other people go. So Patton was interviewed by the Broncos website, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of a quote on what he said about Mougey. Quote, "I didn't know Darren or many of the staff members when I got here, and he quickly shined. His organizational skills, his detail, his ability to manage people." I'm going to stop right there and talk about that, because I feel like with the Jets, you have to manage an organization, not just build up football operations. So I think with this organization, you have to have organizational intelligence. And according to his old boss, Mougey has the ability to do that. We'll find out. But continuing with the quote, "He had a great feel for the draft. I thought he was one of the better evaluators I've ever been around. I thought we had a really good staff when I got here, but he stood out." So all things considered, he kept Mougey when he was ready to let the entire staff go. So how do I feel about this hire? Can I tell you I'm super pumped up? I can't do that. Okay, it is a first-time GM along with a first-time head coach. I would like a little bit of experience somewhere in there, whether it's in the front office, on the coaching staff, preferably both. But there really was no general manager candidate that would have really moved the needle for me. It just wouldn't have happened. I'm glad that Darren Mougey has grown as much as he has. Mougey, I know. But I'm glad he's grown as much as he has in a short period of time. But we'll see what he wants to do as time goes on, whether that is making his decision on a quarterback, what he's going to prioritize in player acquisition. Who from the Jets does he want to keep, and who does he feel that the organization can move on from? It's also important to note the Jets have a big cap crunch coming in the next couple of years. All those first-round draft picks, eventually you got to pay them. Somebody you got to move on from, and he's going to have some tough decisions to make. And what kind of an organization will Mougey have as, in the big picture of things? Is he on the same level as Aaron Glenn? We've seen the Jets have had it where the general manager and coach report directly to the owner. How in sync will they be? Now, clearly, Aaron Glenn had to have some say in the hire. Okay, he may not have had the final say, but he had to give his opinion that Mougey was worthy of a second interview and of serious consideration for this job. So it might look compatible now, but let's see what happens when Mougey and Glenn have to work together in free agency, player cuts, trade decisions, and especially in the draft and scouting. That is going to be a huge decision because remember, Aaron Glenn has some scouting background as well. He was a scout with the Jets for 2 years, so he can contribute in that sense as well. But what I am glad about is the decision on GM was made before the press conference for Aaron Glenn happens on Monday afternoon, and also the Senior Bowl was coming up this week. You had to have that in place. So what comes next? Well, like I said before, add some experience somewhere. Maybe the Jets keep Phil Savage in an advisory role and a vice president role. John Dorsey would be somebody I would like to bring in. He had a very good stint working with the Cleveland Browns. Aaron Glenn's got to start assembling a coaching staff. Several defensive coaches have already been poached, and they're on their way to other organizations. Of course, we'll all be watching who they hire as offensive coordinator, and we'll be monitoring that very, very closely. And, of course, make the decision on Aaron Rodgers. Now that the GM and coach are in place, Rodgers said it himself. After those hires get made, he will have a conversation with them, and he wants to make a decision quickly on what he wants to do. If he wants to possibly renegotiate his contract, retire, if he wants to move on, to another NFL franchise. Jets have a lot of questions to answer this offseason, but two of the big ones, we now have answers to them. So those are my thoughts on the GM hire of Darren Mougey. If you've got thoughts, put them right down there in the comments. Everybody, thanks so much for watching, and I will be back with more content from you know where, the Wicker Chair.